Hello, everybody. It is 2 p.m. Eastern on a Friday afternoon, which means it's time for another kick-ass career conversation. See, it's live. We just do weird things. I am Kim.
I'm Louise, and today we have
Paul.
Yay! Hey, Paul, we're going to let the world know a little bit more about you in a little bit, but we want to start this week how we start every week. What are we celebrating?
I feel like I could celebrate the same things over and over again, but
do.
I will. I know I do, and I love this question. I'm celebrating actually just earlier today. I had my own session with my own coach, and I'm like, oh yeah. I'm celebrating that. I'm celebrating that I have this dream team around me, just not of fantastic biz besties, but also those folks that really help me get through my obstacles and through my roadblocks. And it was fabulous. I'm reminded, like, why don't I do this more often? I need to have my coach on my schedule a little more because it just moves things along. So that's what I'm celebrating today, kind of this energy that I have about pushing through those obstacles and moving on. But yeah, Paul, what are you celebrating today?
I mean, I'd love to jump in on that one as well. I met with my mentor and my coach yesterday, and I also had a live speech that I gave on Wednesday. And both of those things I want to celebrate because I was able to get my message out there, but then also reinforce my message through my mentor. And what I really, tacking on to what he said there, I really love talking to both my mentor and my coach because they come at it from different perspectives. And so one of them really helps to elevate you and lead you in the right direction, but the other one really opens your eyes to things that you've missed. I hear the expression, you don't see the label because you're inside the bottle. And it was really nice to get a fresh perspective because I was feeling frustrated and I had done this event and I did really well, but I'm like, oh, I missed the thing. And my mentor's like, no, just you didn't. It gives you an opportunity to follow up. So that's what I'm celebrating. Just some really good epic wins this week.
I love that. I'm actually going to tack on to both of you. Like that's weird. Normally I go off on like my own tangent. But so today I had a live speaking opportunity where I was speaking live at a summit, and it was amazing. I wasn't 100% sure with the people who were going to be there, kind of what their level was with what I was talking about. I was talking about divine wisdom. So like, you're never quite sure when somebody steps in a room, how much they know about their own divine wisdom. And so I did a lot of pivoting right there on the spot. And I'm going to do shout out to my husband, who was like, you're a great pivoter. Thank you, honey, for knowing that I'm a great pivoter. Because he came up and said that as soon as I was done with it. But it was a great opportunity to say to myself, like, I know what I'm talking about, right? And when we get out there and we share what we have to say, it's like, it's that reminder of, oh yeah, I've done that work and now I get to share it with the world so that they can do their work. And so, yeah, that was super special. And I'm doing some amazing work with my mentor as well. So like, get yourself a mentor and a coach if you don't have one. We may know a few. Before we go any further, Paul, I want to let the world know a little bit about you. Okay. So, all right, here we go. So Paul has an intense love of learning, which stemmed from throwing himself into education to avoid the trauma of his home life. Paul fostered a mindset of wanting to know everything. He turned this into a 20-year career as an artist, with his work spanning the globe and working with industry giants like Disney, Universal, and Nickelodeon. During that time, he's come to realize how undervalued and restrained creatives are, both personally and professionally. It's become his mission to inspire and empower creatives with the tools they need to be successful, to use those skills to take ownership of their careers, and to teach companies and corporations to embrace the creativity of their employees. When we truly understand the value of creativity, the world becomes a more innovative and vibrant place for everyone. And I couldn't agree more. Paul, I'm so glad that you are here with us today.
I'm so glad to be here. This is a great way to end my Friday. Like, this is a great way to end the week. This is wonderful. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Good.
I love that. I want to know, here you are kind of launching. I feel like this is maybe career 3.0 or 4.0,
7.0.
7.0, right? Like it sounds a little different than what you were doing in the past. Tell our listeners a little bit about your career journey and kind of like what brought you to where you are and delivering like such a powerful and under-delivered message.
Well, I'm going to start by saying bend, don't break. That's pretty
Mm.
much been my life philosophy. And so I'll give you the really quick rundown of how I got to where I'm at. Just like you mentioned, it was absolute love of learning, jumping into school to avoid the home situation. I went to self-imposed year-round school until I was in the 10th grade. My mother said it was because I just loved school, and it was true. I did love school, but I loved it because it was a sanctuary from the other stuff that I had to deal with. And so from there, but I've always been a creative kid. My mother has very much fostered this creativity in all of her kids. And so creativity has always been something that's been there for me. And when I started to get into the education thing, I would read every book that I could. I mean, I read the World Book Encyclopedia set like one summer. I was bored. I just really really took into that. And then in high school, I found theater. And theater was interesting because I started off as an actor. I was not good. But the thing is, I was always given the lead because I have good stage presence. I don't get nervous. I'm just really bad at remembering lines, which is not great for an actor. And so, but I fell in love with it because I was able to transport myself to different worlds, to become different people, to step out of my life and have I mean, I did tragedies and dramas and all that. So it wasn't necessarily a better life, but it was a different life. And then I got into college. I declared myself a major the very first day. I was going to be a theater major. Went in. I was probably there for 2 months before the theater acting professor said, "We'll never cast you." So then I had to hard pivot right there. And I met a guy who ended up being a mentor for me. His name was Bob Welk. And I was working one day in the theater, and he came up to me and he saw that I had a good work ethic. And he said, "Hey, Paul, would you like to learn everything?" And I'm like, absolutely. I probably thought about it for like a millisecond. I was like, yes, let's do that. And he did. He showed me how to do every aspect of theater, from maintenance to running the lights to stage management to box office to design. And design is where I fell in love. I became a scenic designer, and then I won a few regional and national awards with that. And then I went to graduate school to become a scenic designer. And I went to #2 school in the U.S., University of California, San Diego, for design. They admitted one person a year in the design program. I was lucky enough to get in there. I did that for 3 years. I worked with a large theater that's attached to it called the La Jolla Playhouse. And I was working with a scenic designer who had a lot of shows on Broadway at the time. I was assisting him, and I was talking to him about how it is to be the apex of design and like what it's like to be the top. And he told me it was horrible, and that he traveled all the time. He was never really had the opportunity to lay down roots. He's like, if you want to be constantly moving, then go with that. And it really opened my eyes because while I had trained to do this for so long, I think he saw in me that there was more. And so he kind of put that seed in me, and it kind of made me pivot. And this is literally right after I graduated. So I'm like, well, if I would have known this 3 years ago, I wouldn't have wasted all the time and effort. But everything that I've done, all the training that I've gotten, has always poured into what I am now. And so eventually I became a professor because I didn't know what else to do. And, I love school. So I thought, hey, let's teach. And then that's like looking behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. And I love school. I did not like that other side. So I only lasted 3 years as a professor. What I loved about it was teaching. I loved teaching. It was the other stuff that went with it that I wasn't a fan of. And in my last year, I had a student ask me if I could make him a little figurine for him and his girlfriend for Valentine's Day. And I've always been somebody who's made stuff. I'm a crafty guy. And so I did. And he put it online before there was an online. And it was picked up, and it was the first thing I ever did that went viral. And so I started getting requests from all over the world to make the same style of figures. They were the Mii figures from the Nintendo Wii back when it was really popular. And so I started making those on the side, and I was only charging $50 a piece, but I was making more doing that on the side than I was teaching. And so I asked my wife, hey, may I quit and do this full time? And she's like, oh, I'll give you 1 year. I'm like, okay. And then I had my second viral thing happen about 4 months later. I made $50,000 in 3 weeks. And she's like, okay, I think you know how to do this. And so that was 20 years ago. And when I say bend, don't break, the whole point is if you're familiar with improv, because I'm a theater guy, in improv, they have a rule called yes and. And that's how I live my life. So people are like, well, how did you get into doing this? It's always say yes to everything that comes in. I've never stuck myself so rigidly into this is what I do. I'm just always bend over here, whatever you want. I'll see if I can do it because it's all the same skill set. It's just applying your mind differently. And all of that education that I had really plays into that. And so I can use the education with the creativity to make anything. And so I call myself Santa Claus for nerds because that's what I am. It's if you have a wish that you don't know how to get, I'm your guy. And so companies have really latched onto that because they'll have prototyping ideas or they'll have ideas that they want. Like I work with the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon a lot. If they need something that's really wacky, but they need it very fast, they'll do a roundtable with their writers and then they're like, well, we'll ask Paul. And then they're like, hey, Paul, can you do this in 2 days? Can you do a singing, dancing robot in 2 days? And it's like, well, I've never made a robot before. I don't tell them that, but I'm like, yeah, sure, I can do that. Yes, and then I move from that, and then you produce, and then you get it out to them, and then you just become known as the person who can make anything. Now, shorter. About a year ago, I got burned out. 20 years of being everyone else's Santa Claus, I kind of lost my wish, and so I wasn't 100% sure where to go with it, and I was doing something. I was streaming my process on a platform called Twitch, and which is like live TV, live theater on the internet. So for 4 to 6 hours a day, 4 days a week, I was in front of a camera building things and talking people through it because I was lonely in my basement studio working. And I was talking one day, just riffing. And I'm like, I'd really love to be able to teach a broader audience, to reach more people. And one of my viewers was like, oh, well, let me introduce you to this woman. I work at Harley Davidson. She came in and she was talking to us, and she was a professional speaker. So maybe you want to be a professional speaker. I'll give you her information. And I met her, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to be a professional speaker now. So I've been doing that. Now I'm coaching and all of this. And what's interesting is I didn't think I had much to contribute because I'm just a guy who works in his basement. But I've been told over and over again that your ordinary is everyone else's extraordinary. And so what I do is so left field for a lot of people that I have an opportunity to open people's eyes to the creative process, especially when you take something like education and imagination and try and put them together. A lot of times they're seen as opposites. And I've figured out how to blend those two together so that we create innovation. And a lot of companies and people these days, they lack that because we've been so shoehorned into getting the answers correct. Don't fail because failure leads to being fired or bad grades or whatever. And I live a life of failure because in failure you learn, and that's where innovation comes from. So that's my origin story.
I love that. And I so need to follow up with you afterwards and see all the people we know in common because a lot of similarities on those early years. But I would love to know from the place you're at now, when you're starting to go in, and the title of today's episode is Unleashing Creativity, right? We want to get to that place of innovation. How do you help people? I saw a lot of people were signing up to watch this live stream, and I think they were excited about it because most people I meet don't feel creative. So how do you help people and go through organizations or however you do it? How do you help people find that place of creativity within them?
Well, the first thing I want to say to everybody who's listening is that I hear I'm not creative all the time. Creativity does not mean artistic. And I want to get that out of the way. Creativity is anything that a human can do that they can pour their passion into. The actual definition of creativity is the ability to use your imagination or to create new ideas. And if you can do that if you're an accountant, you can do that if you're a programmer, you can do that if you're flipping burgers, it doesn't matter. Applying creativity is something that we can do in our lives. And we are the only species that we know of that can use creativity. So get that out of your mind right off the bat. We're all creative. It's just how do you apply it? Now, the biggest thing to do is I have a process, I call it the play process. And I really do encourage everyone to just play for play's sake. To go out there and do something that has no reward that has no reason, to just go out there and play like kids do, for fun. But I use it as an acronym, and it stands for practice, learn, apply, and yield. And this is what it represents, and it is the creative process in a nutshell. Create a daily practice where you brainstorm. Just brainstorm different ideas. What I usually tell people is look around the place where you're sitting. I've got my desk here in front of me, and grab something that you use every single day and try to figure out 10 ways in your head to make it better for you. Don't innovate for the world, innovate for yourself. Necessity is the mother of invention, but there should be a caveat at the end of that that says for yourself. Great ideas come because we want to make our lives easier, make our lives better, to save ourselves on time, not because we want to save everyone else's time. If it happens to apply to other people, awesome. But if not, do it for yourself. So get into a daily practice of trying to make things better for you, to give you back the time that you waste doing other things. I have a really good friend who works in corporate, and he says he has become a master at working for 1 hour a day and spending 7 hours watching YouTube but not getting caught. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, that's a great use of your creativity. It's a sad day that's what you have to do because you're stuck in a cubicle, but that's being creative. So get into your practice and then learn. Always learn. Your brain is an interesting machine because even though you are constantly learning and taking in new information every day, you may not be recognizing it. And what your brain does is it actually stores it into back memory. And when we have brilliant ideas that just kind of occur to us, one, they never occur to us when we're working. It always occurs to us when we're falling asleep, when we're in the shower, when we're driving, when we're doing something where our brain is off. And so when we are in those moments, what's happening is God's not reaching his finger in and jiggling the gray matter. What's happening is your brain is taking all the information that you've accumulated throughout your entire life, and it's starting to put puzzle pieces together. So you look at this coffee mug and you're like, well, I'd like to be able to have it so that it doesn't slip so much, and so I want to put on something that's sticky on it so that it holds my grip very well. What do I know in my life that's sticky? Well, you don't think about things like that, but your brain is like, I remember this one time I grabbed a silicone mat and it was sticky and I couldn't let go of it, and then, oh, what if I put those two things together? That's what's happening in those moments. And so learn. Always learn. My wife hates going to the hardware store with me because I will walk up and down every single aisle and go, ooh, what can I use that for that it's not supposed to be used for? She's like, hours. She's like, you go on your own. And I'm like, yeah, I will. So then we have apply. And applying is basically taking your daily practice, your brainstorming session where you ideate, where you create all these things that are maybe fantastical. And then you take your learning and then you apply the two together to see if you can make it work. Now, I do it from an artistic point of view, but you could do it from any other job's point of view. We all get really good at what we do, so then you can apply that learning, that knowledge that you have with the thing that you would really love to invent and put those two things together. That's apply. And the fourth one is the most important one, and I cannot stress this enough, especially since we're in this digital age, which is yield. Your brain is a great machine. The problem is it is a machine. And if you've ever used a computer to do any kind of task-heavy thing, you've heard the fans kick up really loud. What that is your processor is overworking. It's overclocking, and it's going to run really, really hot until it can process all the information, and then it cools back down. Your brain does the exact same thing. And so what I say is to people is yield. I'm a child of the 70s, and before all these fun little things were around, and so I just had times where I just had to stand there and be inside this thing by itself, no distraction. And it's great because your brain needs that time to process. And so what I say is yield. Give yourself time to just be alone with your thoughts, to allow your brain to get down from that high processing moment to just be normal, to allow everything to be put where it needs to be. When we have those moments of clarity, when we're asleep, when we're showering, in those moments, what it is because we're not doing anything. And so when you go to sleep at night and we fall asleep with the phone in our hand and we're doom scrolling all day long, your brain will work for an hour after that and to catalog everything that you're going on, even when you're trying to close your eyes. And so you wake up and you're like, I don't feel refreshed at all. And it's because your brain never slept. You did physically, but mentally, you didn't. Turn it off. Walk away from it. Do something else. Read a book, because it's anything else to distract yourself from, or just to be inside your own head. So get away from the devices and stuff and yield yourself. Meditate if you want to. Some people don't like to do that. I go for a walk and just listen to the nature, that kind of stuff, just to give my brain time to kind of just coalesce everything. And that's the creative process right there. Do all those things, do them regularly, and the world's your oyster. Unless you
It's so interesting hearing you, because that's basically the talk I gave from a different lens on divine wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what
Game.
it is, right? Because in so many ways it is. It's like if we simplify it down, it is about getting quiet, listening, looking at things from a new perspective. And I love the invitation to solve for you first, right? Because that's where we get to first experiment. Then you can start solving for others. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
the other thing that I would love to say is fail.
Mm.
Fail. Embrace failure. And everyone always asks me, like, what's the one piece of advice you can give? And that is my answer: fail, because you never learn doing something correctly. Think about it.
Yeah.
No, you only learn from your mistakes. If you've ever had an argument in your head where, oh, if I would have said that, that is you go reflecting on failure. Failure is the impetus to innovation. And if we allow ourselves to fail, I call it failing creatively, because every time you fail, you actually are learning inside that. There is a nugget of movement in every failure that we have. And our brains, unfortunately, are wired to accept failure in long term memory, but we don't remember our successes. And we will dwell on that argument or that thing that happened 15, that time your fly was down in front of everybody, and from 20 years ago. You will remember that as a moment of failure, because that's how your brain is wired. And so what you've got to do is you've got to rewire your brain so that you think about failure as a positive, not as a negative. Unfortunately, we're in a society where failure is seen as negatives with your grades. Oh, if you don't do this, you're going to get an F. Well, what if I learned a lot, but I still failed at it? Then to me, that's a success. But in the eyes of our society, that's seen as failure. Same thing in business. They don't want to give leeway for a creative person to do something a little bit different, because they might lose a little bit of their bottom line. But in doing so, they may invent a new product or a new idea or a new way or a quicker, easier way of doing something that would then in the long run make a lot more money, would be more innovative, would bring something new to the table. But we don't want to do that because we know what works is working, and if we do anything that deviates from that, we might see a hit. And we are so short-sighted that we don't think that hit's gonna be forever, instead of thinking about how it will expand in the long run.
Yeah, it's that F word, right? We get stuck on fail, and it's really hard when we have all of that noise going on. I try to help folks see things more like a grade 10 science experiment, right? Like you have a hypothesis, you might think you know how it's going to turn out, but at the end of it, you either have proved or disproved your hypothesis. Really, that's all we're doing, right? But in the process of that experiment, we're a success anyways, right? When we get to the end, it's a success, period. It doesn't matter necessarily what the outcome is, but we've got to use that. We've got to bring the learning forward in order to actually grow and to be innovative. We lose so much when we leave that on the side of the road and just focus on, oh, these are the experiments where I actually prove my hypothesis. Who cares? You already knew that, right? Like the gem is in when it doesn't work. And it's like, oh, what happened? Like, that's interesting, right? And then that's where we get those nuggets from.
Some of the best inventions happened because somebody was working on something else. Vulcanized
Mm-hmm.
rubber was found on accident.
Yeah.
We use vulcanized rubber on everything. Car tires used to be white, and then some guy accidentally vulcanized rubber. He overheated it, and he's like, "This is way more durable." Things like that. They just happen on accident, and it's because they're trying to do something and they goofed.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about so many things in this world are made that way, where we just stumble onto it. I was watching a thing today about LED lights, and I was like, LEDs are cool, but all LEDs are capacitors. And capacitors are in everything that we have, and they don't look like light bulbs. But capacitors are also what runs our solar panel. A capacitor has no light that comes out of it, but you can shine a light into it and it absorbs energy. But if you push energy through it, it emits energy. It's this one thing, and they found all that out on accident because it emits infrared. But now we have cameras that can see it, and they're like, oh my goodness, that produces light. But we also know it absorbs light. So all of these things are found on accident. We made it originally as a capacitor. It's to help make our machines run better. But then we found out it can do all these other things, and look at what we've done with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to know from the two of you, because you have this, I see the similarity around this topic today, this creativity piece, because you both have a theater background. You both like fully immersed yourself in careers that were creative. I did
But then
not.
I went to law school, so
That's a different kind of theater. Let me tell you.
totally different kind of drama.
So I'm really curious around this idea of creativity and careers is like, can you see like what you've done in that space, in that creative space? Can you see it like how you've pulled it forward into your work life, your life today? Can you see those threads in what your career is now?
Yeah, go ahead.
100%. Yeah. The group that I actually spoke to this week were theater students. And, there's 50 kids sitting there. They're college kids. I say kids, they're, that's just because I'm old. But there are 50 students there. And I was telling them, I said, most of you will not even have a career in theater. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, don't that. I said, the training that you get here is going to be so universally like wanted in every place, because as a theater person, one of the things that I love about it is when you're doing shows, the show is going to go up and it's going to go down. And so you're forced to stop working. There's no perfection in theater because you don't have the time. You've got to get it done to a point that it can be used. The lines are going to be done. This is the acting that I'm making. You can always go back and do it again, but there's a deadline. And you have interpersonal skills. There's so much management skills. You understand lighting, you understand how to talk to people. So many gifts that you're given in a theater atmosphere that you can apply to every facet of life. My oldest son is 17 and he loved backstage, and he had an opportunity to be on stage to do a show, and he was nervous that he wouldn't be able to do well. And then he got cast as the lead, Macbeth of all things. And first show ever, never auditioned, got the lead. But we went and watched him, and we're like, he's killing it. And it's because he just embraced it. He's like, he knew so many different facets of it, and he's like, I knew what needed to happen. I understood that if I'm quiet, they can't hear me, because I used to be the sound guy, and we're always like, talk louder, All of these things come into play, and you become such a well-rounded individual, like human, when you do a theater versus any other aspect. It's very much that linear thinking versus the whole world thinking. When I started doing the speaking thing, I reached out to all of the, your power players, all the people that your pocket people, all those people, and said, hey, I'm doing the speech thing now, and where I'm talking about creativity and education and blending them together. And they're like, that's what we do, Paul. We don't need you to come talk to us. It's our job. And I'm like, oh, okay. Who do I need to talk to then? So it was eye-opening, because my coach is very much like, no, you go to all the people that because that's where all your opportunities are. And every single one I talk to, they're like, nah, dude, we're good. So that's because that's what theater is. Theater is this well-rounded thing. Now I'm really curious, in law, how do you feel that applied?
Well, it was the opposite. It was quite the opposite in practicing law. But I will say that, so absolutely, I would go back and get a theater degree every time I have an opportunity again. 100%. Absolutely. It is why both my husband has his undergrad in broadcast media, but he was also a theater guy. And both of us are encouraging our 14-year-old daughter, who is very interested in being on stage. It's like, that's great. And learn about the totality of the theater, right? Be in all the different parts and be in all the different pieces, because it teaches you about collaboration like you don't learn it anywhere else. It teaches you about interpersonal skills like you don't learn it anywhere else. It teaches you about leadership like you don't know anywhere else. I will say that going from there to practicing law was challenging in many ways, but it did, in that there's very little collaboration, very little actual leadership, very little, like all the things that you would want. But the part that was helpful for me was I knew how to advocate. I knew how to advocate because as a rigger, I knew what to say to somebody who was standing on my line, Like, I didn't care who you were. You're in my way, right? I can't put my props down because you put your coffee cup there. Uncool. We learn to speak up, right? I was the stage manager. I had an opportunity. I went to ASU and I had an opportunity to actually start our stage management program, which is now you can get a certificate in stage management there.
Nice.
As an undergrad, I had that opportunity to go with another undergrad and say, we need this training. And they listened to us. What, like in business school, do they listen to you when you say you need this new thing? No. This is how we do it. So I will say that I learned all of those skills. And I mean, Louise, you know me, I use my drama degree every day. In multiple ways. And but it's being around creatives allows you to know yourself. And I do, when I talk about my journey to self-mastery, my journey to really understanding myself, it started because I was in the theater. And, Paul, you were talking about not wanting to, wanting to be someone else and step out of who you are for a while. You absolutely get to do that, which also then gives you a mirror to say, but who am I?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's this beautiful holistic thing that absolutely helps in all sorts of careers. And it really helps define yourself and gives you lifelong skills to continue exploring yourself in new ways. That's where I would go with that. Thanks for asking.
Well, I find so I've recently, like fairly recently in my life, taken up improv, right? And that's something that I did to overcome my introversion and my shyness to say, like, how can I start to get out in front of people in a way where I'm feeling like I know my shit, right? And that was my impetus to improv, and yet so much more. Right? Just learning to use more than just your brain to get things done is amazing. We have so much wisdom in our bodies. When we start to move, like all of a sudden, like things start to make sense. Right, Paul, you were talking earlier that we need this time, this yield time, this space, this pause, so that we can give our brains the actual food it needs to make those connections that it needs to make. And it's amazing in improv how when you get out of your head, all of a sudden, like things come out of your mouth and you never even imagine. And I'm like, how does that happen? Out of my whole like first 52 years of my life in my head. And now all of a sudden, like there's things that tumble out of the top part of my body that comes from my body. It's amazing. But it just goes to show, right? Like when we talk about our careers and our career journeys, there are all of these things, this experience that we have from our past that we actually get to pull forward, and we get to say, okay, but this is really those, right? I don't know what they call them, the transferable skills, but really this is like who we are and the things we bring to this moment in time. And we get to experience all kinds of things, taking that forward into whatever this next chapter is of our lives.
Yeah.
100% agree. 100% agree. My coach likes to tell me, because I'll do a speech, and he's like, "Wow, you had some really good pearls in there. Go back like 30 seconds." I'm like, "I don't even know what I said, man." it just comes out, and he's like, "You love to wax poetic," and I'm like, I do," and that's the theater in me. It's the learning, and I just want, and so I'm always trying to make beautiful analogies, and I think that's also like 6 years of sitting in front of a camera trying to inspire people in my basement, but I'll like have these like really wise things that come out of me, and he's like, "Oh, you need to write that down." I'm like, "Did you record it?" Because I don't even know what I said anymore. So I'm very much taken to recording everything I do now. So because you don't know, because it's all of this stuff that you've absorbed, and then you don't know when the sponge is going to get wrung out, and when that thing is just going to happen. And I do these like Facebook lives and that kind of stuff now, and I'm trying to really inspire people to play more and to use their imaginations and such. And I went to my coaching session and I said, I just feel like a skipping record, like I'm saying the same thing over and over again. And I'm like, is that what I'm supposed to be doing? And he's like, yes, and come at it from different perspectives, but you never know when something that you said for the 1,000th time is going to be heard by someone for the first. And when I was doing this speech, when I was doing the speaking thing on to those college kids, I had a man walk up to me afterwards, and he said, "Your story sang to me so much because I'm 42 years old and I'm a freshman in college."
Mhm.
He goes, "I completely threw away my old life because this is really what I was passionate about. But I had concerns. It's the end of the semester, and he's like, I don't know if this is really what I should be doing. But then you went up there, and I saw where I want to go. And the journey that your journey is so similar to mine that you made that decision for me." I'm like, "No, you made it for yourself, but it's good. We want to hear those things said aloud, that it's okay to give permission, that kind of stuff." And so, even though I've said the same thing 1,000 times, that man had never heard it before until that moment, and it changed the course of his life. So you just got to kind of embrace that. So you never know what's going to come out. Just encourage yourself to do it. It's
Yeah.
improv.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that being in the moment and being okay. I mean, I started today's episode by like not even saying the words right. And I've said it 106 times. So I clearly know what the words are, but being okay with not knowing what's coming next is something that actually allows us to dip deeper into our humanity. It allows us to be really present with who we're with and in the conversations that we're having. It allows us to be present with ourselves and therefore do really cool things with our nervous system because we're not living in all these other places, right? Yeah, I think there's so much power in it. So whether it's going to play or play in the theater or play in improv, all of these are gateways, right? Entrance points. How else would we start to encourage people to do this? Like, let's just brainstorm here.
I think a lot of it is when we think about questions or results, we think about them in what we want what our expectation it should be. Like if I'm asking a question and I know I want the answer to be yes, my brain is saying yes. And so then when I hear no, it's devastating. And I think it happens with everything that we do. I have an expectation, and then when that expectation isn't met, I'm set back. What I've trained myself to do, and I teach this to my kids, is that when you are in these moments of expectation, understand that it's not this direction, it's actually this direction. There are so many avenues that your expectation can take. Understand that you may encounter any of those. And once you understand that that is a possibility, there's never the devastation. It's always the ability to redirect. And you're never taking a step back. You may be a smaller step forward. There may be disappointment, and you can own that, and that's okay. But then you're never stopped. You're always got forward momentum. And so I think that embracing that mindset, and it all comes back down to mindset, is accepting that, and it's that failure thing, accepting that, and failure is not bad, accepting that there's multiple possibilities, and then I may encounter any of them and still move forward.
Okay, so because I know he's listening and he would kill me for not pushing back, because I pushed back on this exact thing with my husband in the kitchen 2 hours ago. So I don't believe we always fail forward. Oh. And I do believe, and I understand that I'm talking to a white man right now. I do believe that there is from my conversations with lots of people, I work in the social impact space. So, right. So there is a lot of systemic racism and patriarchy in this idea of fail forward, because you just said it's so true. We just had this conversation. Not lying. We literally just had it. I don't think we fail forward. I think that puts too much pressure on a lot of communities, a lot of individuals that don't have the opportunity to fail forward. We fail all the time. And so normalizing failure as an opportunity to learn, as you just said, and to see what you were just talking about, right? Here's the expectations, and it's all these different things out there. It's not just in front of us, it's besides us, and it's behind us, because I have fallen on my ass and therefore fallen backwards and then found a new path. And I found it from where I am. So I get the concept behind fail forward, but I knew that if I didn't say it, that I would get an earlobe later. So there we go. There's, brand new info from Kim's space.
And I think like I agree with you 100%. And unfortunately, being a white man, I have had privilege that and successes that were not otherwise available to other people. When I think about failure as a forward momentum, it's I remember the very first thing I said, bend don't break.
Yeah.
Forward does not mean always that way.
Yep.
Forward is it's never stopping. I think that's a better way. Maybe it should be, failure to not stop.
Mhm.
It's we don't want to it's that hard break that we hit when we're disappointed or when things don't work in our direction that we don't think about. We get stuck, and then we internalize, and we think about all the things that went wrong instead of opening our mind to the possibility of all the things that can happen around us.
Yeah.
So maybe I appreciate you bringing that up, because it definitely will affect how I present that in the future, because you're right, it isn't always forward, but there is never a lack of momentum.
There you go. I love that. Beautiful. Yeah. Thanks for playing. I appreciate that.
Hey, the day you stop learning is the day you start dying, right?
Right? 100%. 100%. All right. I did just look at the time, and as much as I really, really want to continue this conversation, we should probably think about letting people know what our takeaways are, what our golden nuggets are, that we would love for them to take forward with them. So what do we think?
You want me to go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the biggest takeaway is that, one, you're never too old to learn, just period. And you may be the wise man or woman on the mountaintop, but it doesn't mean that the person who just made the hike can't give you insight. And I think wisdom comes from everywhere. So because you only understand your perspective, and as much as you would like to think that you have a worldly perspective, you never will. You have your very own perspective. And so I think that's a really good takeaway for me on this one.
I love that. I love that.
We kind of talked to a little bit around this, but it really stuck out to me, is that we all have this wisdom that we just think everybody has too, right? Like, Paul, you were talking about, do I have to say it like 100 times, 1,000 times, the same thing over and over again? Because like, I know this, I've heard it before. And yet when we do that, like, we are actually sharing our wisdom with the folks that need to hear it. It doesn't matter how easy something comes to us, like, or how innate or natural it feels. Like let's use that. Like, that's our superpower, right? Like, that's that space. And when we can step into that a little bit more and just be sharing, like the world can open up. Because we all complement each other, right? We all have different superpowers. We're all part of the Marvel universe, and it would be boring if everyone had the same power.
Go X-Men. That's all I got to say about that. No, I think that, Paula, you said something, and it's so funny because there's so many creative people in my life that I do take it for granted, and I forget. And so I love having these conversations that not everybody has that background. Not everybody had that joyful time in their life where we got to just be and experience and play in so many different ways. And so to open those doors and for more of us to talk about it and normalize it and say, it doesn't matter if you're 32, 42, 12, 72, just go do it. Just go play and start to experience your experience, because your wisdom, as we're all talking about, your wisdom needs to come out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
My golden nugget. Paul, thank you so much for this conversation. Where can people find you in the world if they want to play some more?
If you would like to learn how to play better, you can find me at paulpape.it, or as I like to say, you can just go Paul Pape it. And then if you'd like to invest in Santa Claus for nerds, you can come find me at paulpapedesigns.com, or anywhere on the internet that is Paul Pape Designs.
Perfect. And you will notice, for those that see his picture, he's not a different Paul Pape. When I saw your name came through, who also does stuff with Disney, I was like, whoa, who's that? No, Paul
have been
Pape Designs
confused.
is very different than the voiceover actor.
We have been confused for each other for so long that we're now friends.
Oh, I
And
love that.
we're like, and I had a website for the longest time called I'm Not That Paul Pape because it's a very familiar name. And so I get these inquiries, and there's a court judge, there's a dentist, there's all the they would, because I have Paul Pape at Gmail, and so I'd always get these weird inquiries, and I'd just reply with I'm not the Paul Pape that you're looking for, and then I'd post their replies. And it was a thing for a while, but yes, I know the Paul Pape you speak of.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you came and played with us today, and I look forward to staying connected and continuing the conversation as well. Louise, what do we have going on in the world? I mean, I know you let a little canary out of the cage last week. I don't even think that's the right term,
Did
but
I?
you said that there might be changes coming in the months to come. But what do we have coming up next week?
Next week, we have a guest coming on, Jennifer and Jeff. I know Kim is super looking forward to this
Super looking forward to this.
conversation. And it's going to be a great one, making conscious career choices. Near and dear to my heart too. So please join us for Jennifer Mulholland and Jeff Shuck next week. It's going to be fantastic. As we kind of learn where we're going and growing and what pivot might look like in the future for us here on Kick-Ass Career Conversations. You just never know. But in the meantime, you can find us at yourkickasscareer.com. Please make sure you go there and you'll see all of the great things we've got going on, including maybe some things coming up. We'll see. Please.
We're intentionally cryptic.
Please connect
because we don't 100% know.
But it doesn't keep us from moving.
Nope.
That's for sure. Connect with Kim and I on LinkedIn. Follow us on wherever you're listening to this podcast, on YouTube or the podcast universe. We're all over the place. So thank you so much to our listeners. And thanks, Paul. It was a fantastic conversation today. Thanks so much for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Absolutely.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.